So this is the analysis breakdown of the best current pro Fade players in Tier 1, which are these three players found off VLR stats, post Duelist patch. Now Fade is pretty much played on each side of the map. There's not like a set place you play for every round. But if you do play A, you're going to be anchoring A. So we're going to be covering mid-top first. So these blue areas are where you're going to be starting at, and you're essentially just trying to garner info and take small fights mid over here. And once you're pushed off or smoked off here, you fall back to one of the yellow line areas, which is where you're going to be playing mid round mostly. Now, it's split into two sides, and that's because it depends on which side you're leaning towards. More often, probably like 3/4 of the time, they're on the A side to support A more. If you really think it's going to be a strong B side, then they're going to be starting on the right side instead. Now these I's are for mid pushes and also for info. I don't have the lineup, so you'll need to look up a lineup video, but that's an I.
Where are you?
That missed. But that's another I. It scans all of mid. If you're lucky, you can shoot through the smoke too, if you do that I. Before we get more into the Valorant plans, let's cover how Fade is actually being played in pro play. So as a recon initiator, your primary job is to gather info. You're trying to scout for the info knowledge across the map. More often than not, you're going to be taking these early info engagements and back off right away. And during the pre-mid round, you're going to be using your prowlers and eye a lot to re-clear stuff and gather info. And usually, if you're playing Fade correctly, you shouldn't have any prowlers honestly by the time a post plant starts if they're not hard rushing a site, because you're going to be using that to gather info. And usually, even if it's smoked off, like for mid-top example, if that's smoked off, you're still going to be prowling from the yellow area and prowl like that to check inside the smoke, but also to check outside of the smoke. And with these prowlers, although it's not a silver drone that sees everything, they lock on really far away once the enemy's near it. Like as soon as that's out of the smoke, anyone standing here, there is gonna get locked on with a prowler. And that will gather info for you if anyone's mid. And that's a very universal thing. For whichever site you play, you're gonna be prowling after you back off a bit to check if they actually pushed up. Now for the C's too, usually you use the C's to just fall back once they start pushing. If it looks like they're pushing at all, you're gonna be panic seizing and backing off to save your repositioning. Trying to play with your team, you know. If you do have your C's for post plant though, of course do it, but never save onto your C's if it seems like you're getting hard pushed by dual sentries. Just throw that C's and back off. Two more basic things you should really know is you're not always going to be eyeing for this retake eye stuff, because sometimes you do want to just eye these tight corners. So if you're playing Fade correctly, often on the retakes you're not actually gonna have any prowlers left to clear these tight angles to see if anyone's there. So if it's like if you're low on numbers, maybe like a 2v2 or something on the retake, sometimes you just want to eye like that, those really tight corners there. It's kind of hard to shoot that eye too because it lands so quickly, and you can swing out with the eye because they're gonna have to shoot the eye if they're there. So pretty good eye. The second thing you gotta know when you're playing Fade is, like with these fast prowlers, when you're falling back and they're trying to push you to slow them down, you do the same thing with a Fatal. If they're hard rushing, for example, on a main, while you're backing out, you just want to fail them like that. Stall them off more. So back to the Valo plant. These blue areas are where you're starting again as a started a round, and then you're going to be falling back to the yellow areas, and that's where you're going to be playing at. And in these yellow areas are really where you want to be prowling, or also when you're like starting to back up. Often on Fade, when you're starting to back up, you're going to be prowling like that as you're backing up to scout info and repositioning at the same time. And the second common prowler these Fade players did was from this general area. They took cover here if they were worried about the mid-top push. Prowler like that. And usually you're going to be having
There.
A player towards elbow, watching your
Careful
A
here.
main, or maybe on the
There.
right side. But they're usually gonna be watching that side, so you don't gotta really worry about the left as much. You also do want to be supporting that player, so
I'll find you.
if they need info, or like if your team needs info, you want to throw
I'll
eye
find
up
you.
there.
There.
And definitely find a lineup for that. Again, I don't know any lineups, so you gotta look up a lineup video later. But you want to be throwing an eye up there to scout for info if anyone's down there. And if you're really starving for info, because you don't have any more prowlers or
Bring them
eye,
down.
and your A player died early in the round, you want to try to push up here to gather a bit of info and just early hold them, so you could call their earlier rotate once you see someone. Make sure to run away as soon as you get that engagement. So I figured out how to turn up my microphone audio possibly, so I hope it sounds better for future. But now we're gonna be covering starting on A as fade. Whenever you're A, you're always gonna be starting on elbow. And there's gonna be a one-way smoke on that pillar right there, usually, if your team is playing correctly. And whenever you're starting here, you're always gonna be prowling as you're running up onto this A main area. What this prowler does is it tells you if anyone pushed past that one way. They tell you it's kind of dangerous and that you can't hold the one way like that. And if anyone did push past the one way, then you could have your team util like a omen blind, a breach flash, etc. You know. So as an A anchor, your primary job is to gather info towards this A main section to see if they're executing or rotate stack towards it to call over your rotates. Now let's go over these seizes really quick first. Every one of these seizes were used when he was running away because the enemy team was pushing up. And he did those seizes to back away more safe, okay? So again, do not be hanging onto those seizes. And you shouldn't really be fighting exactly with those seizes either. They're more often just used to stall the enemy. So if you weren't pushed off the angle at all, then you're going to be playing this general area. You want to always pre-fire this general spot. That's where the ciphers put their trip at. If they're lazy and put the basic trip like that, you can easily destroy that. So once you're playing this area during the mid round, you're just going to be prowling like that. Be throwing your eyes towards those areas.
Where are you?
And I would make the eye preferably land in these two spots. That way just scans for all the info to see if there's a lurker or not. Because this eye isn't a push out, so you don't necessarily need to see how many people are there. And because, you know, those type of eyes are really to shoot people, kind of. This eye is really just to gather any info, guaranteed info if anyone is there on the enemy team. That's what the eye is for. Now, if you did see someone, well, if you're probably spotted someone and you're not heavy fighting this, then you're gonna be just holding this pixel angle. And as soon as you see someone, you shoot, throw your prowler, and run away. Whenever you're rotating off from these spots, you're gonna be going towards elbow first, but if it's too dangerous, then you just fall back straight to CT. On A site, we're just playing a full retake essentially. You do not want to stay on site to fight. You do not want to do that. So you're going to be falling back. You're only going elbow if you don't think they really pushed. And there's going to be a one-way setup here if that's the case. And you're just holding another info contact right here essentially. To see if anyone's pushed up and then you fall back again. Now for A site, whenever you have your eye for retake, the fades tended to always go towards top, and they throw their eyes in one of two spots. Right? So these are the two eyes. This one lands a bit slower but clears a lot more. This one lands faster, it's a bit more hard to shoot, but it clears less. I would learn both, and maybe throw this eye when we have util to combine it with, like a omen flash for example, or breach flash or whatever. And this one if we don't have the extra supporting util to support the eye not getting shot as much. Going back to this, these deeper eyes are especially good if you're going to be deep pushing A and you're starting on A2. Definitely do those eyes. One lineup you need to know if you're playing A is this eye right here. For that eye, you're gonna be throwing it from this spot
Careful
over
here.
here. And I don't know the lineup. You gotta
I'll
look it up.
find you.
But it should land. I think it's on this
Where
rooftop
are
right here. It'll scan all of tiles essentially and part of mid. It's a very good supporting eye for mid players, okay? So definitely know that eye. So talking about retakes a bit more, if you have your C still, you want to always seize the spot on A on a retake. It clears out to see if anyone's hiding back there. You could also combine that with like a nade or an aftershock to make them flood out. Now for B site, which we haven't talked about yet, you're going to be throwing your C's on one of these three spots. This spot right here is when you're flooding it onto site, when they're executing. This one's kind of the same, but I think this one's a bit situational. I didn't really throw this one as much. I think it's because it gives them a lot more cover-ish. And this one kind of leaves them stranded in the open more. So I would test it in game. But this C's right here is on the retake C's. So the other two are kind of flood retake C's. This one's on the full retake C's. When this C's is pretty nice because any players playing from top are able to see if anyone's trapped because the lines are extending, you know. So it clears out that whole section right there. Now for the eye, if you got a B retake eye, if you have the eye for the retake, they're gonna be throwing it onto this ledge right here. And if you got your ult for the B retake, this is the ult they did to get all the sight to clear that out. This eye is very OP because it goes super high up, it scans literally everything on site. It's really hard to shoot for the attackers going onto site. And for these B eyes, I noticed they never really had their eye for the retakes because they already used their eye to scout for info, so they didn't really have their eye. But I think one thing they would have eyed if they did have it was towards this window because it clears like all of this back section, which is very good. As when they did eye on B site, it was because they were executing on or they were trying to flood retake. That's the only time I saw them eye. The other times they didn't have an eye.
I'll find you.
But when they did flood retake or they were just trying to shoot through the smoke, they eyed up there as a very OP eye to shoot a lot of people. And again, when they're executing onto site, even if you're not flood retaking, you want to just prowler over there. If you're already set up on B, you want to be prowling that. This is the least common position you're going to be playing on defense, but if you're starting B main, it's only because you're essentially pushing into B main. And there's two ways to push this really. One is you're going to be prowling right away to gather the info if anyone pushed through, or if anyone's towards that. And the second one is you're just going to full commit and throw C's like that to trap them inside. And again, you're only doing this if you're pushing B main with teammates. You're usually going to have a one-way up there if you're playing correctly. And once you're set up over here too, if you're staying a bit longer, I suggest throwing an eye into that window. That way it could also scan back here in case you miss someone, but also scans everyone mid-bottom for more additional info to see if they're stacking towards A side of the map. Now, once you do this stuff, you're going to be falling back towards market once you get pushed off at all. And you're really just playing a market whenever you're on B site, like starting B on defense. You're just playing this market area. If you're playing B on defense, this is essentially where you're always going to be starting at and playing at this whole yellow section. You're just playing market really. And you're trying to get fights down mid towards tiles especially, and also just hold the market space. And you do want to be prowling still, of course, for info. They don't really eye mid from here, I noticed. They don't eye when they're playing market. But they do eye again for this, once they start executing there. But you do want to prowler into B main occasionally, like go over here. To prowler like that for info during the mid round. You also want to be trying to prowler into mid, see if anyone's over there. And if there are people mid, you could combine this with the omen blind, which is kind of common. And you just flood out with that omen blind. Not by yourself though. I only do that if you have teammates with you. but that's a pretty good mid play to do.
Bring them
Like
down.
you're probably to text someone and your team blinds out, you push together. It's pretty common on Sunset to do a mid reclear during the mid round to push that out. So do take note of that. So the last thing I have to note is on the retakes, if you ever got your eye going this way, but if you don't have your eye, it's not a definite path. You just go whichever one you think's better in that situation, or what your team calls for. Like if you want to flash out somewhere or help a teammate out, you know. So just go whichever the situation calls for if you don't got your eye. Now that's really all I got for the analysis breakdown of Fade. It's pretty simple. You're really just trying to gather info, like kinda aggressively. And by that I mean like you're using your util a lot and you probably won't have any prowlers by the time we do the retakes. So make sure you're gathering info and try to be in positions where you can support teammates from multiple ways. Like, you know, as A, although you're anchoring, you can still support your mid players with that I. If you're mid, you can support both A side to gather info and mid top. And if you're B, you can support the market, mid fights, and also the B player by throwing your I and Cs. So again, pretty simple, that's it. Make sure to look up lineups. I did not cover any lineups, okay? So I'm expecting you to know lineup hacks.